Oh, okay. Okay, you gonna pat me on the shoulders? Or something? Okay, we'll figure it out. Also, I realized this when I was going through my slides. There is a bag of biltong for us. Is this for us? Like a little snacky snack between slides? It's exciting. Well, I am so excited to be here. This has been, before I get actually into the information, this has been an amazing conference. You know, I was thinking about the subject matter today, and you're going to find that I'm going to be getting into a lot of nuance. In fact, one thing I like to do crowd play. It's fun for me, and it helps y'all, you know, it sink in. So everybody say nuance. Nuance. Okay, we're going to practice this real quick. Okay, we don't do that because of? Nuance. Good, that's the only word you're going to say. It's not like 5 words. Okay, so anytime I go, nuance. Okay. Nuance. Good, okay, we're there. Good, this is perfect. All right, but there's going to be a lot of nuance in this topic, and I really love that from the very first talk, from Jessica's talk onward, it has been about setting a foundation about food freedom, mental freedom, and understanding yourself in a powerful way. And I'm telling you, when you get into the nitty and gritty of what's called practical application of nutrition, you need to know yourself, and you need to know that you're not somebody else. Make sense? Okay, so first of all, I'm not a woman, right? Let's just cut that out, right? So why am I even here? Why am I even talking about this, okay? So, for one, there's a lot of women in my life that I love dearly. I have my wife, I have my 2 daughters, I have my best friend, my mom, she's right here. Some of y'all have met her. And so I have a care for women. I have a lot of women in my life that I love dearly, and I want to see them thrive. You know, I look at my child every day. I don't want to see her go through the things that I went through. I don't want her to see her go through the things that my clients went through, or my clients are going through, right? I want her to have metabolic freedom. You know, some people don't like it when kids eat fruit, but I tell you, when my daughter can like stop eating halfway through a bowl of frozen mangoes and go on about her day watching Bluey, that she can self-regulate like that, that makes me so happy. It makes me so happy, because when I was her age, I wasn't self-regulating, right? I'll never forget, one of my favorite things to binge eat was a big bag of family-sized dollar chips with shredded cheese and Valentina hot sauce. Here's the gross part. I would stuff it in the side of my bed, and when I was sad, I would cover me with a blanket, and I would shove it in my mouth until I wanted to go to sleep. 2 days in, that's some nasty stuff. It's not even chips anymore. Anybody ever seen the videos of like prison burritos? Yeah, it was gross. It was gross. Oh yeah, you get it. Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like. And it was just going in. So let's start at 14 years old. As I said in the introduction, I was 260 pounds. That photo on the far right is me at 14 years old. You think I look older than I am now. You should have seen me then. I look like a 35-year-old man with a really bad haircut at 14 years old. Oh, come on, there's spaghetti strings on my forehead. This is a bad photo. It's bad. But I was extremely unhealthy. I was extremely overweight, right? And so I had a doctor's visit, and the doctor encouraged me to lose weight, and so I did. I did it through a very bro sciencey diet. There's a place called bodybuilding.com. It was getting super popular back then. And so I did the lean chicken breast, the lean protein powders, the skim milk, the frozen lima beans with only salt, just like, the old school. And so, but because of that, I was also doing this during puberty, right? And one thing we don't talk about, just to add in a thought, we don't talk about the hormonal implications of extreme dieting through puberty, right? And the issues that can cause long term. And so I was doing this during puberty, and so it started to cause a lot of hormone dysregulation in me. And I started to have binge tendencies. So I went from like being an emotional eater to being like a binge eater, and I would have these binges. And the problem was I associated, because of my bullying in school, I associated being thin with being socially accepted. Because I didn't get bullied when I was thin, because teenagers are evil, okay? And so, but I started trying to deal with my binges. How? I made myself throw up. It was easy. I got the binge out of the way, and I woke up and my scale was lower the next morning. It was a win-win, right? And so that got super severe. I got to the point where I was throwing up in my breakfast, my lunch. It didn't matter if it was a salad, a pudding, didn't matter. If I ate it, I started to chase the high of it. And so that photo on the left there is me at my most. Now, I know people are like, you might be able to see like little abs on the side of the phone. You understand, like, the picture doesn't do it justice, just how thin I looked. right? And like, I was very thin in that photo, but I thought I looked good. Oh, I thought I looked good. Looking back now, the way that we distort the way we look. And so that was really bad. I found my faith in Jesus, and that was a huge moment for me. I was 16, because it taught me that, yeah, we should clap for him. Yeah. Let's go. But it taught me that my body wasn't my own, right? That I was bought with a price. And so I needed to treat it as such. And so that helped me start dealing with it. But it didn't take care of it. That was just the spiritual aspect of health, right? And so then I found the ketogenic diet in 2017. And all of a sudden, I could control my binges. It was magical. It was magical. I got off my ADHD medication. It was, I leaned out. It didn't trigger me like other diets did with a constant influx of food and hunger pangs. But then I did a bodybuilding show on a ketogenic diet. I was strict ketogenic diet from 2017 until roughly 2020. And during my first bodybuilding show, on the back end, is what's called a reverse diet. And I don't know if obviously when you diet, you have urges to binge, but when you do a bodybuilding competition, the back end of those is really difficult because your hormones are very displaced. And so I started binging. And what do binges trigger me to do? Purge. Right? And so I went 9 months on the ketogenic diet without a relapse, and then I purged again, and I realized, okay, mental health matters too. So I got the nutrition figured out, right? I got the spiritual health, but I also need my mind right. And so that was that, and I haven't relapsed since. That was September 15th of 2018. Was my last relapse with bulimia. Thank you. Okay, I want to hurry this along because I know you're like, oh, this is a great story, but what does this have to do with the topic on the front slide? I'll get into it. So in 2020, I got into running, right? And I was super strict keto for 4 years, and it went great. But for some reason, when I started running, I started having complications, which I'll get into later. During those complications, I was able to try some things and fix the complications. With my female clients, I started to see commonalities between what I was experiencing and what they were experiencing. And then so that made me dive into this focus of women's health. Okay, so to understand, before we get into the oh, we gotta be quicker than that. We gotta go. We're all riding on ketones here. So before we get into the nuance, we need to really understand some of the issues with women's health. And this, let me preface up front, this is not to say that science is bad, that studies are bad, that women shouldn't listen to studies, but when it comes to you as an individual, you need to understand some of the discrepancies, okay? So, some information gaps, right? 48.95% of women know little about their cycle, 12% know nothing about the phases of their cycle. And I'll tell you, it gets concentrated when you have people that are trying to lose weight or get healthy, right? About 95% of my clients, I have to explain their cycle to them, right? Now, I'm proud I'm able to do that, but that hurts me. That saddens me, because that's not fair to them. They should know, and they were not taught, and that is not okay. Okay? 58% of women see period pain and PMS as normal. You know, breast tenderness, extreme cramping. We're going to get a little detailed here, everybody. It's not normal. Those things are not normal. Just because they're common doesn't mean they're normal. That's a really important phrase to remember in life. Most women don't know the long-term implications of birth control, disrupted cycles, PCOS, and other sex hormone-related issues, okay? So what do we do to understand the body better? We do studies. However, there's some issues with that when it comes to the individual. While women make up 50% of the population, and some clinical trials are greater than 50% women, 75% of research is done on men. Right? Understand that. 75 of the studies that you apply to your daily life, over 75% of the participants are men, okay? Now, understand that there's reasons for that, right? It's easier to study men, women are on 30-day cycles, things like that. I'm not saying that that's okay, and I'm not saying that this is wrong or not wrong, okay? What I'm saying is that you need to understand it when it comes to you as an individual. That just because somebody says do this and they base it off of a study, for you as a woman, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the thing that's going to work for you. So it's just being aware of that, right? I'm not saying it's bad, you just need to be aware. Now, one thing I really want to point out, because everybody here knows everybody here, because everybody here Say that again, everybody here. Really good. Nuance, yeah. Everybody here is on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They're on TikTok, wherever you're at, okay? Understand that most influencers that share studies and research you hear online were performed on men. Again, it's just important to know. And something to take with you, just for free. You have to understand that some people want to be influencers and some people want to have influence, and you need to understand the difference. Okay? You are not going to find your health in the shadow of your favorite Instagrammer. Okay? So it's really important to understand that. Again, this is all about nuance. Oh man, y'all are going to get A's. Okay, so this leaves women at a disadvantage just because of lack of knowledge. We don't have all the knowledge. We're working on it, but we don't have it right now. But now comes in the ketogenic diet, right? There's hope. Everybody here has talked today and shared stories over the last 3 conference days about it. It's a diet that heals. It saves lives. It helps people find themselves again. It helped me find myself again. However, there's a dark side. I know we don't like saying these things. I'm going to say some very uncomfortable truths going forward, and you are going to be okay with it, okay? Okay, good. All right. Well, you didn't really have a choice, but I'm glad you agreed with me. Okay, now women are not properly studied for long-term implications of a ketogenic diet. They're just not. Because why? Because honestly, we haven't been even studying the ketogenic diet that long. You know, Dr. D'Agostino showed the amount of studies that are coming out, and that's great. I love reading them when they get published. But we're just getting into the cusp of this thing. There's so many things from a foundational scientific place that we don't know because we're learning, and that's exciting. So when it comes to practical, personal, daily application, you need to take that into consideration, that there's a lot of theory going on. There's a lot of theoretical science, as we would call it, right? It's just, I have a hypothesis, I don't have any control or funds to run a study to test it, so I just have to try it, n=1, see if it works, and apply it, and if it doesn't, don't. Now this does not mean, this is really important, this does not mean a strict ketogenic diet is wrong for every woman. But it does mean we need to be mindful of individual approaches, okay? So, I'm about to go through 3 phases of keto for women. I want to say something to the men real quick in the room, just to address y'all. Just because this is built for women doesn't mean that you can't get something out of it, okay? And you might know women in your life that are going to struggle with some of the things I'm going to be talking about, and it's good that you know this information. I also love that the husbands are supporting their wives here. You could have looked at the title and said, I'm going to go play putt-putt, yet here you are. So, thank you for that. Okay, so there are 3 phases of keto for women. This is something I built over the past 6 years of coaching keto and then graduating from the NTA. There is phase 1, fat adaptation, phase 2, protein foundation, and phase 3, carb cycling. I know, scary stuff. Okay, you're also going to notice that things get more nuanced as the phases progress, right? Because you have to understand that there's a difference between objective truth and subjective truth, okay? An objective truth is, for example, red meat is not bad for you. Subjective, right? Like it just is what it is, okay? So let me test y'all. Animal protein is the superior protein. That is what's objective? We're close. Same thing. It's being somehow I'm splitting hairs. It's fine. All right. So let's try it again. Fats and proteins are essential. That is objective. We're working on it. We're getting there. Carbs are non-essential. That is okay. Here we go. Oh wow. No Carbs are optimal. That is subjective. I heard a false. We'll talk later. That is subjective because there's no science that says that they're not good for you or good for you really, but people do thrive on them. Some people do eat them and do well. So that is a subjective statement. We have to be willing to separate the two because a lot of us live in subjective truths acting like they're objective, and they're not. And honestly, and it does more harm to us than to others because when we need to heal and we need to change things, because we have these subjective thoughts as objective truths in our brain, which I'll get into some of those as we go forward, we pigeonhole ourselves. And now we're miserable, but we're unwilling to change because we think that that's a lie, and we can't do that because this is the truth. So it's really important to separate the two, okay? So let's talk about fat adaptation. So there are people that are deciding to do keto or getting back on keto. This is the phase for you, okay? This is the phase for you. You know, as I said, people, well, that's because anybody can do phase 1. Everybody should do phase 1. So phase 1 is a duration of 8 weeks. That's the time that I generally put a client on it, or you can apply this to yourself. So the goal is to help your body become efficient and use fatty acids as a primary fuel source. That is the goal. That is the goal. If you notice, there's nothing about calories or weight loss or fasting. In fact, I even put only fast if it feels easy. Do not force it. The goal with this phase is not to lose weight. It is to make sure your body can, in the most calm way possible, transition to a fat approach. That it can become as efficient as possible without stressing your body out. If you'll notice, as we go forward, I'm really big on cortisol and how it responds to hormones and how it either can be a positive or a negative benefit, okay? So, macro breakdown, strict ketogenic diet, real standard stuff. 75% fat, 25-30% protein, 0 to 5% carbs. There's not a lot of nuance in this, right? This is very straightforward. Do it for 8 weeks. Make sure you take your electrolytes every day. Make sure you salt your food. Make sure you drink your reds. That's not on the slide, but I say you should. I guess salty too, since they're a sponsor. It's fine. No, they're great. Okay, but so those are some tips, right? So this is phase 1. Phase 1 is super easy, yeah? Yeah, it's not complicated, okay? Phase 2, protein focus, okay? Now, what are the goals here? The goal is to help establish a healthy foundation of protein for longevity and muscle growth. This is also going to be the phase where you're going to see probably a bit more fat burning. Why? Protein's more satiating. It increases thermodynamics when it's being digested for basal metabolic rate. Basically, when you eat protein, you burn more calories using it and breaking it down than other macronutrients, right? You're also going to be putting on more skeletal muscle mass, which is also going to increase BMR and help you burn more calories. So overall, protein's important. Can we all agree on that? Yeah. Good. Awesome. So what's the macro breakdown here? So fat needs to be over 50%. And the reason why I find this to be true and I hold this steady is because I know people working with clients that thrive on 40% protein, 60% fat, 50% protein, 50% fat, 70% fat, 30% protein. Now the goal here is to maintain a primary fat fueled space, right, in your body. And so keeping your protein moderate to high, and then keeping your fat high, but keeping your carbs ultra low. So how do we do that? So again, fat over 50%. Now protein, this is where we're about to get a little bit more nuanced. I'm not going to give you a straight answer here, okay? This really depends on you. There's a couple ways that you can do this. Number 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Super easy. Go online, put in your height. They'll give you a BMI range. I know we all hate BMI, but like in terms of the weight ranges, just do the highest one and just shoot for that in grams of protein. It's a great, easy option. Number 2, 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. Again, Dr. D'Agostino talks about getting DEXAs yearly. It tells you your lean body mass. Do 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. Super simple, okay? Number 3, this is what we call the threshold, okay? Bare minimum, 100 grams a day. Bare minimum. Sure, yeah. You should not be eating less protein than that a day, okay? Why? Because even some of the biggest bodybuilders, the natural bodybuilders, not the, but natural bodybuilders have around 90 to 100 grams of skeletal mass. So you could be sure you're at least covering your skeletal muscle mass in grams if you hit this number, okay? Another one, bonus one, you want to get really easy. Take your height, translate it into centimeters, and do that 1 gram per centimeter of height. That's a real simple one. Yeah. Carbs, 0 to 5%. Notice the carbs don't change here, okay? Pro tips, take your electrolytes every day, salt your food. Notice I took out the fasting. At this point, you're fat adapted enough, you can probably tolerate some fasting, and it's not going to infringe upon you becoming more fat adapted. It'll probably actually encourage it, so that's good. Okay, carb cycling. Let's get into the scary one. All right, so duration of carb cycling is 4 weeks to ongoing. The reason why it's 4 weeks instead of 8 is because I always say, you need to test something for 30 days before you choose whether it's wrong or good for you, okay? So 4 weeks is the minimum. You do this. If it doesn't work, then ongoing, you don't do phase 3. Magical, right? Very simple. It's not complicated. If it does work, you do it ongoing, right? So it's 4 weeks ongoing. 4 weeks of a test trial period to figure out what works or doesn't work, and then ongoing, right? Now, what is the goal here? The goal is to help you establish a healthy hormone balance that creates a healthy long-term ketogenic diet, okay? Macro breakdown is over 50% fat. We always want to be, this is super important, you always want to be over 50% fat in your macro breakdowns. Because we burn fat primarily. It's a good thing to be over 50% fat, okay? Protein stays the same. It's exactly what it was in phase 2. And then carbs, options vary. We're going to discuss the different options. Again, this is going to get very nuanced. Good. All right, so we will discuss the different approaches. Okay, now pro tips. Keep fat under 100 grams on days you eat carbs. Now you might be saying, well, John, if I keep my fat under 100 grams a day, isn't that going to kick me under 50% fat for the day? No. So for example, if you're eating 90 grams of fat on a day that you increase carbs, for example, then if fat is 50% of your calories, that's 1,600 calories a day. If you're eating less than that, so that it forces it under 50, you're not eating enough. No one here should be eating 1,600 calories or less than 1,600 calories continuously. Nobody. Nobody here should be doing that, okay? So this maths. So then the question becomes, why? Why in the world is phase 3 even a thing to talk about? It's a thing to talk about for me because it's what I deal with the most. It's what I run into the most. It's what I work with the most. Again, the first two phases are very common in the ketogenic space, and everybody does them and everybody loves them, okay? So why does this matter? So let's go back to my story about running real quick so I can help explain this. So I started running, and for 6 months of my running, I was doing great. My heart was going down, my heart rate was going down, my paces were going up, and then all of a sudden, things started to get weird. 1 week, my heart rate on my paces, so basically I was running at the same pace, but my heart rate was higher than it would normally be. It's weird. Whatever, maybe it's an off week. A couple weeks later, my heart rate at rest was higher than it's supposed to be, by up to 30 points, right? Usually my resting heart rate was 50, it was now 85, all the time. That's weird. My blood sugar, my fasted blood sugar, for 4 years on a strict ketogenic diet was in the 80s. I checked it one day, was curious, 125. That's weird. My carbs didn't go over 10 for 4 years. Huh? That doesn't make sense, right? And then it really peaked at depression. I started to have like severe waves of depression. And I remember I was at a friend's house and I'm sitting across the room and she goes, Jonathan, are you okay? And I was like, I am not okay. Like, I don't know what's going on with me. And so one of my friends that helps with my running said, you should really try carbs. And it was really hard for me, and I hope you can resonate with this. It was really hard for me to choose to do that because I had been keto strict for 4 years, and I was really proud of that streak. I was really proud of that streak, right? And so for me, it was like, okay, I either give up the sport that I love and what I love to do, or I need to try this, okay? And so I tried it, and within the first day, I responded positively. So give me an example. My average blood sugar was like 115. I'm going to show you some graphs here in a second. The first day I did it, the next morning I woke up, my blood sugar was in the 80s. It was the lowest it had been in 6 months, right? That one day of adding carbs in dropped my blood sugar 60 points overnight, fasted, which is just, right? From standard knowledge, what we know, that doesn't make sense, right? And so I started to do some digging, and I started to try and understand why. And so running is a very stressful activity, right? It's very stressful activity, meaning it creates a lot of cortisol. It's also very, what we call, it's glycogen depleting, meaning even if you're fat adapted, even if you use fat, you deplete glycogen when you're doing long endurance runs. And so your body has to release cortisol to stimulate what's called glucagon to make your body create blood sugar to replenish. That's how we don't die on a ketogenic diet, is that beautiful tool called gluconeogenesis, right? The problem is that when that amount of cortisol is leaching, right, it starts to get up and it starts to become very stagnant. What's really high when cortisol's high? Blood sugar. What's really high when blood sugar's high? Insulin. Nice. You heard my talk yesterday. That was cheating. And so insulin, right? And so this creates a vicious cycle. Okay. I know I'm talking about my running, and I get that, but I promise you, I'm going to make the connection here real soon. So this compound effect can create a vicious cycle. So stress releases cortisol, body raises blood sugar, body releases insulin, body becomes inflamed and stressed, which triggers another stress release of cortisol, on and on and on and on we go. This is a condition known as physiological insulin resistance. Okay, it's where you're creating insulin resistance internally. It's physiological in nature. You're not exogenously eating carbohydrates or ultra-processed foods in order to create this condition. You're doing it internally by hormone dysregulation. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. If it doesn't, we have a Q&A later, way later. Just write down your questions and put it in the box. I'm just really excited because I thought I was going to have to answer questions and it was going to ruin my 40 minutes, but no, I get to talk the whole time. Okay, so what happened with me with this? Okay, so I started doing like this targeted ketogenic diet, and here are my levels. So if you notice, does it have a pointer? Ooh, fancy. Oh, it's not working, never mind. Okay, so.
You were low.
Oh, was it low? Maybe I just can't aim.
There, yes.
Okay, anyways, it's not going with the TV. The TV doesn't like me. All right, so as you can see at the very beginning of the graph, my blood sugar is averaging fasted in the 115, 120s. That was a strict ketogenic diet. I started to do a targeted ketogenic diet where I was targeting carbs after my runs. My blood sugar started to come down tremendously, where it was now averaging in the 80s. But here's what's crazy is the bottom slide. That bottom graph is my ketones. Okay? So when I was on the strict ketogenic diet while running, my ketones were 0.1. I put myself back into nutritional ketosis by introducing carbohydrates. Oh, I know. I said that yesterday. I was like, they're all going to go, oh, yeah, no, it's trippy. Okay, so what does this have to do with women's health, right? Because that's the title of the talk. Well, I was suffering from all these things, and I was able to fix myself. And I was working with a client. Y'all might know her. She said I could talk about her. Mary Roberts. Everybody know who Mary Roberts is? Keto Mary, all that stuff? Yeah, she's awesome. And she came to me because she was experiencing symptoms. And we were just talking as friends. We were just talking as friends. But she goes, man, my period's irregular, I'm stressing, I'm gaining weight, my blood sugar is in the 115, 120s, I'm feeling kind of depressed and low, I can't sleep at night, and I'm like, man, this sounds like me. This sounds like me, that's interesting. So I asked her, I was like, hey, can I try some things on you? And I did exactly with her what I did to myself, and it worked. It was magical. In fact, let me show you something. So when I first started working with her, and she was doing strict ketogenic diet for over like 6 years at that point, her insulin was 15.6 on a strict ketogenic diet. That doesn't make sense, right? We started cycling carbs for her, and her insulin within a year came down to a 6, right? We cut it by almost 66% by adding that back in, okay? So what you need to understand, so I'm going to explain this a little bit more. Let's go back to that cycle graph just real quick. You need to, what? No, this is right. That's right. Mom. Okay. All right, so, is this a comedy show or a nutrition talk? I can't figure it out. Okay, so we have to understand some things about the female cycle. It's really important to understand that a woman's cycle is an endurance event, okay? It's an endurance event. It's not easy just because it happens, okay? There's a lot that goes on that's intense, right? We're talking about 4 phases of your cycle. You have your menstrual phase, your follicular phase, your ovulation, your luteal phase. Different points in time, it's easier, produces less cortisol. Other times, it produces more cortisol. It's not as easy. Okay, so we have to take that into consideration for one. Then we talk about perimenopause, menopause. Your ovaries are, for lack of a better term, going into retirement. I know y'all aren't going into retirement, but they decided to take a break, right? So your adrenal glands take up all the slack of testosterone production, of hormone regulation in general, and they're already taxed from stress. Another thing is mental stress, right? I say all the time, if my wife didn't come on the cruise because she's just over like 2 pregnant to come. And she's like 6 months pregnant. And why are you laughing? Anyways, I'm gonna hear about this later. So my wife's pregnant, but when we pack for cruises like this, like the day before, I'm throwing stuff, and y'all are on the low carb Facebook group. I'm like, today's packing day. It's like the day we fly out. Woo! Right? My wife is like, she has a list like 5 weeks in advance. And even though the stuff's in the suitcase, she still stresses about it. I see her sweating from her forehead. But it's not a bad thing, because without that, my life would be in shambles. If I go by myself, I always forget at least one thing, even if I have a checklist. It's really annoying. Right, so she is necessary in my life, but the thing is that she perceives the world through a more stressful lens than I do, right? Because the way her mind works, your body doesn't understand the difference between physical stress and emotional stress. So you get more stress just from living in general. Now bring in the kids, bring in a full-time job, because it's really hard to have a single income household around here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it just adds, it couples, and next thing you know, you're basically running races all the time. Your cortisol is constantly up, right? And so what we see when we go on a ketogenic low-carb diet is our body removes the stress, the toxins, the inflammation, and all the refined carbohydrates from a standard American diet, which is great and why we feel so good. But in some women, as they continue on that, and their appetite's suppressed, and so they're fasting and working out intensely, that cortisol starts to slowly leach, and it starts to compound over time. And when that happens, it spills over, and when it spills over, you start to find that you're in this cycle. Now, that doesn't mean that every woman has this issue, but some do. And it's frustrating for them, because when they go to somebody and say, I don't feel as good on a strict carnivore diet, and they say, you're just not doing it hard enough. Right? That's wrong. It's wrong. Or, you need to eat more fat. You need to eat more protein. I've tried all those things for 6 months and I gained 30 pounds. Tell me something else, because this isn't working. And it's just this we talked about disempowerment last night with Joe and Gormy, and it creates this level of disempowerment. You're no longer in control of your diet. This thing that promised you freedom now has you in chains, and you're miserable. And that's not okay, so you need freedom from it. So that's why phase 3 exists, just so everybody knows. I just wanted to explain that. So let me give you some testimonials, because the proof, Dr. Cho stole it. He said proof is in the pudding. That was my line. I told him that while we were running. Okay, so I'm going to say the proof is in the pork chop, because I feel like that's more, All right, so these are 3 of my clients that, and they're all very different stories, and that's why I put them on here. So the first one to your far right is Jackie. Jackie's a sweetheart. She lost 40 pounds on a strict ketogenic diet, but then she started to gain weight on it, doing the exact same thing. She showed me her macro logs. She was doing the same thing. She started gaining weight. Her blood sugar started to go high. She started to have hot flashes. She also started to have something called early onset perimenopausal symptoms. What that is when your cortisol is so high, it creates hormone dysregulation, and you start to show signs of perimenopause years before you're entering into it. Right? But we just assume, because we're on a ketogenic carnivore diet and we feel, and we're doing the right thing, that, I'm just I'm early onset menopausal. No. Mary Roberts is also another example of this. When she came to me, she was having 60-day cycles. She thought she was in perimenopause. To this day, 2.5 years later after working with her, she still has regular cycles. Every 30 days, on time, right? We re-regulated that, but that was all cortisol. That was all hormone dysregulation. So Jackie had the same issue, and so the photo on the left is when we started working together. She's very dramatic with her before photos. She does these faces, which is fine, because the contrast is great, right? She looks so miserable in the first photo, and then the second photo, she's just killing it. She is killing it. I'm not condoning running for everybody, but she's finally hit her dream of running 10 miles a week. She's getting stronger. She finally front squatted 135 pounds, which is, it's good. She lost 40 pounds and she's kept it off. And we just did that by adding pumpkin and sweet potato to her diet. It wasn't drastic. Okay, middle one, Bethany. Bethany's a cool story. Why? Because she's already ripped. You see there's no before and after, right? She's never changed. She's always looked like that. The difference was when she came to me, she was miserable. Thinness does not mean health. Okay? If you are at a body fat that makes you okay with looking in the mirror, but you are miserable, you need to change something. And you need to work on how you perceive yourself. Okay? Okay? Okay. Statements like that need acknowledgement, or you'll be in denial, and that's not okay. So when Beth came to me, she was strict carnivore due to some gut issues for 3 years, okay? And she said she didn't feel good. As we talked, come to find out she hadn't had a regular cycle in 1.5 years. She was 27.
Oh.
That's not okay. Okay? What did we do? We added 1 cup of white rice after her workouts on the day she worked out. That's all we did. 1 cup. It's less than 50 carbs. Didn't take much. In 30 days, she had her first cycle in a year and a half. Right? Whoa. Sadie. Sadie is one of my favorite clients. She says, best friend. I don't go that far. I feel like that's, I don't know. Yeah, but anyways, I love Sadie. She's sweet. So PCOS, again, just same kind of story. PCOS, weight loss, weight gain, stressful eating, and we carb cycled her. And all of a sudden, the weight started coming back off. The PCOS symptoms went away. And now she has a much more controlled relationship with food. Because what you also find is that when you get frustrated on a ketogenic diet, you go back to what you know. And even though you're not binging on cake, you start binging on steak. That rhymed, and I did not think it was going to. It's good. So the point here, though, is that this works. I'm not just talking through thin air, and I'm not saying that it's for everybody. So let me also preface. I have clients that do strict carnivore and never get off of it, and they thrive. Those women thrive. I have women that do strict keto, and they thrive. I have women that cycle carbs, and they thrive. It's about... Oh, y'all didn't forget. It's been a while since I asked. All right, so phase 3, carb cycling. How do you do it? This is the nuance. This is where we get really nuanced here, okay? So you can have cycle-based CKD, which is a cyclical ketogenic diet. It focuses on monthly cycle to dictate carb intake. So your menstrual follicular phase, you do ketogenic, low-carb, or carnivore. And then during your ovulation and luteal phase, the more cortisol apparent phases of your cycle, you add in carbs. You get up to about 80 to 100 a day. If you notice, this isn't 200 grams of carbs. This isn't 300 grams of carbs, right? This is just enough to regulate your hormones, all right? Fat should always be the primary fuel source. The goal is always ketones. Ketones, 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 okay? TKD. This one is one most people's favorite. It focuses on your workouts and timing carbs around them for maximum potential. So you want to keep total carbs stay around 50 grams total a day, and then after your workouts, consume 30 to 50 grams of whole food carbohydrates. It's not included in your daily. So basically on days you work out, you're eating less than 50. On days you do work out, you're getting up to roughly 100 grams. Okay? People like this one because they still get to have days of strict keto, and then it varies a little bit. So they're not eating the same thing week, and then it changes. Also, maximum potential, what I mean by that, I mean that when you work out, you deplete glycogen. And so when you eat carbohydrates immediately post-workout, those carbs immediately get shuttled into glycogen stores. And so if you work out for an hour and then you eat, say, 40 grams of berries or 40 grams of carbs from blueberries or something like that, within 2 to 3 hours, that is in your glycogen. It doesn't exist anymore, right? It doesn't exist. So it's much easier for your body to soak up and process. And so it's kind of like a 2-for-1. So your body gets suppressed cortisol, but it also doesn't have to get stressed out trying to replenish the glycogen for you, okay? The third one is a weekend-based CKD. People also love this one because it's super simple. Monday through Friday, you're keto. On the weekend, you're not. We'll talk about the pros and cons about that one in a second. But this is the most simple to follow. So Monday through Friday, keep carbs under 50 grams total. And notice I say total a lot, not net carbs. Saturday and Sunday, keep carbs between 80 and 100 grams total, okay? For perimenopause, menopausal women that are experiencing some of the things that we've talked about, or we may talk about at the Q&A, number 2 and number 3 are your options, right? Those two, both of those would work fine. I hope you pick number 2 because it tells me you're lifting weights, okay? And you need to be lifting weights. Fun fact, after 50 years old, women on average lose 1% of their muscle mass a year. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're 100, you've lost 50%, right? When you're 80, you've lost 30. That's a huge number, okay? So I hope that you're working out. I made this other slide. I know there's some women here that are on cycle, some that are not, but I wanted to put this up here just so it's photoable, it's photo worthy. You can take it with you, stick it in your pocket, pull it out at brunch. So menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulation phase, luteal phase, okay? The durations are rough. Some women have 26-day cycles, some women have 32-day cycles. Just vary with it, right? Day or two is not going to make a huge difference. Okay. So, tips and tricks on carb cycling. This is where we get in the mental because this is a scary topic for a lot of people, okay? when doing CKD or TKD, do not eat trauma-associated carbs. When I said that you could possibly eat carbs, that first food that popped in your head, don't eat it. Scratch it out. Don't think about it. Don't look at it. You're not allowed to have it, okay, at all right? Remember this, I have clients that used to binge bananas. Guess what that client never eats? Okay, I have another client that used to love candy apples. Guess what she doesn't eat? Apples, exactly. Don't eat foods that trigger your past. Simple. Okay? Now that can be hard, and I'm going to talk about this here in just a second about why that can be hard. I want to really challenge y'all mentally here. But firstly, understand the difference between macro abstinence and micro abstinence. Okay? So we know the saying like abstainer versus moderator, right? Everybody who hasn't heard of that before, be honest. Abstainer versus moderator, so I can explain it. Thank you. So an abstainer is someone that needs to abstain from a food group, right? So I'm an abstainer, meaning like I don't eat white cupcakes. I abstain. I haven't had a white cupcake in 10 years. I will never have a white cupcake unless I'm on an island. I used to say I wouldn't even then, but I realized I have a child now, so like it'd probably go down my mouth. But I would try to avoid it unless that happened, right? I'm an abstainer, right? Other people are moderators. They can just moderate whatever. It's just easy for them to moderate, right? And don't get too caught up in the identity of this, kind of what Jessica alluded to, but just be mindful of like the kind of choices that you need to make so that you can have a stable diet, right? And most people that are moderators don't know they're moderators because they don't have to think about it. That's how you know you're a moderator. You just kind of, whatever, right? However, in the low-carb keto space, we've painted big, bold, broad statements to help cater to the masses in terms of messaging, right? And so all carbs, you need to abstain from all carbs, right? That's a macro abstinence stance. I believe in what's called a micro abstinence stance. This means that it's not the macronutrient carbs that you need to abstain from. There's foods within that branch that you need to avoid. And all of you, unless you are a strict carnivore, you are all micro abstainers. Why? Broccoli is a carb. I know we call it a vegetable, but it's just pure carbs. It really is. Spinach leaves are pure carbs. So if you ever think, oh, I could be a micro abstainer, you are one. You are one right now. You just don't think about it that way because you've not been taught to think about it that way. Right? So realize that there are foods that you can eat, and maybe you haven't tested them yet, and that's okay. That's one thing I loved about the previous talk was have openness, open-mindedness to find out who you are and not who your favorite influencer says you should be, or not who Karen and your DM says you should be because she saw carrots on your plate during dinner, and she was like, "You're killing yourself," and like bite me, right? Third thing, stick to whole food carbs. This will get me on my soapbox. I'm going to try not to let it get on my soapbox. An apple is not a funnel cake. I cannot stand social media posts that compare whole foods to processed garbage. It bothers me for a lot of reasons. I'll get into a couple real quick. Is the glucose that's in it turned straight to glucose in your blood? Yes. That isolated, yes. Okay. Let's look at an apple, for example. Okay, an apple, one, shares, we all know what grounding is. We've all seen the benefits of grounding. Who knows what grounding is, right? Okay, fruit technically shares the same frequency with the ground as you do, right? It's all connected. Think about that for a second, right? So that frequency helps fight off free radicals that glucose could create. It also has antioxidants that do what? Fight off free radicals, right? So while in a metabolically unhealthy person or in excess, those foods can cause a lot of fatty liver and long-term inflammation and stuff like that. In a moderate, appropriate approach, they're actually designed to fight off the one negative thing that they give you. Think about that. God's good. Right? So understand that, right? Now, a funnel cake, there's nothing good about them. They just taste good. And honestly, they don't taste that good. Have you ever been to a funnel cake and like you start chewing and you realize you're really just like swirling oil in your mouth? But you're like 5 and everybody's hopped up on sugar and you're like, this is so good, I want another. And like oil's dripping out of your mouth. It's a mess. There's nothing good about those foods, right? So understand the difference. And again, am I saying that all of you need to go out here and eat carbohydrates? No, why? Because it's about? I love y'all. You're so good. Oh my gosh, I have to hurry. Okay, so, she's approaching. All right, so, couple mental things. I'll try to be quick. Empowering your mind, because you cannot make these kinds of, the reason why it's easy for us to stick to broad statements about nutrition is because we don't want to deal with ourselves. Does that make sense? Right? You want your plate to regulate your mindset. And that is not going to carry you long term, especially if what you're doing currently has negative implications or ramifications on you physically, and yet you're being willfully ignorant because you don't want to look yourself in the mirror and say, I need to work on some of my habits and tendencies and self, okay? So it's really important to work on the mind. What is that? I guess I hit the mouse. Okay. So we're going to go through a couple things. The most powerful tool you have is your self-awareness. Not Lion's Diet, not keto, not butter, not MCT, even though it's really good, right? Self-awareness, knowing yourself, knowing who you are, knowing your purpose, and being willing to stand in that firmly, right? Not identifying with a diet or identifying with words or identifying with your addiction, but knowing who you are is the most powerful tool you have. And a lot of y'all are scared to do anything I just said because you have no self-awareness. And you know it. And you know it. I know. Oh, I would have clapped, but it's heavy. It's heavy. I get it. It is heavy, right? I struggled with my bulimia for almost 10 years because I lacked self-awareness. I wanted my diet to fix my problems. I didn't want to fix myself. I wanted my plate to do the work that my mind should have been doing. Okay? What is your why? Right? So I want you to, if you haven't done this exercise, I want you to do it. Ask yourself the 5 whys. What does that mean? That means, why do I want to get healthy? Okay, because I want to feel good. Well, why do I want to feel good? Because I want to be mobile. Why do I want to be mobile? Because my family wants me around. Why do you want to be around your family? Oh, because I want to be able to run around my grandkids. Right? So it's this idea of like going through the layers so that you can get to your root whys. Because motivation does not get you through long-term sustained diets. It doesn't. Lifestyle changes. You need to have the deep whys. Just the scale is not going to be good when you're not motivated, especially if it's up one day. Yeah, come on. Yeah, that sucks, right? You know, like you do everything right the day before and you get on, it's 3 pounds higher and you just want to break it, right? So what do? You remind yourself that you want to run around with your grandkids. I remind myself when I look at my daughter self-regulate. That's why I live in the freedom I do. That's why I do what I do. Because I don't want my daughter to deal with the demons I dealt with, right? And so know your why. Don't bite off more than you can chew when your jaw is sore. What do I mean by that? Yeah, I know, food related. But why do you do that? What do I mean by that, rather? A lot of us get super excited and get in a gym regimen, and the first 2 weeks, or a diet regimen, and the first 2 weeks is great. And then life punches you in the mouth, and all of a sudden what was really exciting sucks. And you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to the gym. And then you know what you do? You stop going. And because you committed to 5 weekdays a week, you can't make it, and so you don't go at all because you said this plan failed. Don't do that. Don't bite off so much that as you chew through life, you can't keep chewing. Right? Because then you're not eating, right? And so make sure when you start smaller. 2 days a week. Okay, I'm going to remove all white things out of my diet. Let's start with that, right? And then we'll add those. Then we'll go into phase 1 of keto, right? You can start slow. You don't even have to start the phase 1. You can start pre-phase. You can have a pre-phase. You have 2 pre-phases. Whatever you need to do, start where it's going to be. I want you to think about right now. Everybody close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. I want you to think about the most. I know this is not going to sound good at first. I know. I want you to, wait, I'm hurrying. I want you to think about the most stressful week you could possibly have. What could you do in that most stressful week? What could you sustain? And that's where you need to start, okay? 2 things. Your pace is the pace. Your pace is the pace. Stop comparing yourself to others. You are stronger than you think mentally. You don't think you can do some of the things that, you may be thinking about all these things you need to do after this talk. You're strong enough to do them. You are. And there's help and people that love you if you don't. Last thing is, this is my prayer for all of you. Dear friend, I'm praying that all is well with you and that you enjoy good health in the same way that you prosper spiritually. I love you all. Thank you for letting me speak.
Sorry guys, I got to cut you off because we speak after lunch and I want you to be... Wait!